It's the path to more love and more care. It's the path to more truth. It's the path to a life that isn't two-dimensional. They teach us what to love and how to love it. If you can, this might be too glib, but if you would, we can be role models to ourselves.
Welcome to People Watching, a podcast where we figure out what it looks like to become the role model we've always wanted by talking with real people who have found real role models in their own lives. I'm Megan Robinson. Every week, I sit down with a guest, and together we cut through all the noise and identify better sources of hope, creativity, and wisdom as we learn to make decisions about the kind of life we want to live. So join us. Let's do some people watching. My guest today is Christian Shockley. I first met Christian a few years ago when I was interviewing vendors for learning management systems and discovered Pathright. And in the process, I first met Christian a few years ago when I was interviewing vendors for learning management systems. And in the process, I discovered Pathright. Christian works at Pathright as the head of Ed Labs and Learning Experience Design. I immediately appreciated Christian's perspective and his learning-first mindset, his obvious creativity, and his curiosity about the world and how we talk about our experience. In addition to his work at Pathright, Christian is also the head of training with Ready AI and the director of sales enablement for ASAPP, where he designs curricula, playbooks, and competency-based onboarding for teams. Busy guy. Christian is a graduate of King's College London, and when he's not working, he can be found at the leather working bench or writing on pedagogy, poetry, and digital learning. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. This episode does touch on difficult themes, which include the loss of a loved one due to suicide and suicidal ideation. If you or a loved one are in crisis, please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. I'll put the website in the description below. I know what it's like to struggle with this, and I know what it's like to seek help. If that's you, I want you to know just how much I want you to be here. Take care. One of the things I love to do with my guests is to read off conversational touchstones. These are just guidelines, expectations for each other as we talk through these ideas, and also for our listeners so that they know what to expect. So would you start us off reading the touchstones?
Sure. Whatever we share is by invitation, not obligation. If either of us is not comfortable pursuing a topic, let's just say I'd prefer not to share. Thank you.
Silence is also a partner in our conversation. Feel free to take a moment to reflect without immediately filling the space with words. Leave room for the inner teacher to whisper as well.
Be present as fully as possible. This is a space to acknowledge our doubts, fears, and failings as much as it is a space to share our joys, convictions, and successes.
Ask open, honest questions. If we're not sure what the other meant in the question or statement, ask. It gives us a chance to clarify or rephrase. And ask questions that we genuinely don't know the answer to. Surprise is a great catalyst of insight. I would love to hear more about, because you had said when we were corresponding beforehand, you had sent in some ideas, and you had talked about, let me find this, pattern spotting, negative habits, doing the opposite, and how your dad's death has shaped you and your relationship.
Yeah.
And I'd love to explore that a little bit more, because so much of what I'm talking about is a positive side, but there's also a shadow side to this. I'm curious how you would explore that.
we've touched on elements of this, but again, putting it in a story, it's a little weird. It feels a little uncanny even at times. I was the guy who grew up loving Hemingway, who took his own life in his kitchen. Loved David Foster Wallace, took his own life. I could probably name other folks, predominantly men, because suicide happens to affect men more than women by about 4 times. And I think that's because of our silence around these issues and our unwillingness to break the solitude and build the bridges that are required to keep us safe, not only for ourselves, but also for the people that we love.
Mm.
So I almost had this kind of romanticization of this literary life and this. I don't want to say that I romanticized people dying in this way, but to me, that was part of the tragedy of their story. And again, it was, as you said, this kind of like thin view of their life. It was a cardboard cutout of what that actually was. So when that actually came to my doorstep in a very real way, when my dad passed, it even recast a lot of. I don't think I had that kind of almost nostalgic idea of these people's literary lives at the point that my dad died. But if I did, it was entirely gone after he passed. And even in a person's death, that person is gone and all of the artifacts of their life still remain. And some of those artifacts are wonderful to discover, but you become like an Indiana Jones of that person's life, piecing things together and finding things that you didn't know were. And you can either put yourself in this position where, their legacy is going to change drastically and too much winds up in the rubbish bin, or you can, again, contextualize their life, resist putting a preface on it, understand them wholly. So I think for me, after my dad's passing, especially in this way, all of the confusion that was left in the why created space for me to find out that I don't have to have an answer.
Mm.
And it created space for me to, I think for the first time in a very real way, start to accept the fact that we truly accept the fact. This is something I knew but was not accepting. Truly accept the fact that none of us know what we're doing and we're all figuring it out.
Yeah.
And there is no one except for Jesus who walked this earth and knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't mean that we have to throw lives away. So for me, that was a very kind of rambling answer to your question. I think for me, I had to learn not only with my dad, who was my first hero, he was my first role model, right? But with so many other people in my life, I had to learn how to hold on to that little kid who wanted nothing more but for his dad to come home from work, who wanted nothing more to wake up early before everybody else and just have a few moments with dad at 4:30 a.m. before he went to work. I had to learn how to hold on to that kid and hold his hand and embrace the truth of a real man's real bumpy, confusing life that
Yeah.
ended in a way that no one would expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course, I don't want to say that I feel an obligation to share, but I almost do. It's each time I share it, I view it as this invitation in the world, again, to not assume, to not
Mm.
preface that person in your life who you think would never do this, but
Yeah.
instead to pursue the question, to ask again, to pattern spot in your people's lives what their life looks like. I actually had today, this was perfect that this happened today. But I had a friend text me, his name's Steven, a friend from years ago, one of those friends that I let decay. And he texted me out of the blue to talk about some work stuff and congratulate me on this thing. And I was catching him up on my life. And he said to me, "You've always been that way." And I was like, ooh, that hits. I just had this guy who I haven't talked to, and I just gave him this like random piece of information. And he said, "You've always been that way." In other words, and he meant it in a great way. In other
Yeah.
words, he was pattern spotting, thinking like, oh, when I think about Christian, he's that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Which can be a gift. And I started thinking about it. And we really want friends in our life who can either say, "You've always been that way," or maybe "You've never been this way." And they
Right.
can mean it in good ways and bad ways, but we pattern spot without categorizing so that we just see this person's life trajectory. That's a very long-winded way of saying for anyone in your life, but I think especially for men, pattern spot,
Yeah.
check in, don't put them in that like rigid mold of that. That's just, who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. In various ways, this image or this figure of a solitary hero
Mm,
with a purpose and with the skill set to pursue that purpose with clarity and dedication. It's come up in the figure of the cowboy, the American
yeah,
cowboy, superheroes, all of this stuff. This expectation that you have a male figure who has it figured out and who knows how
yes,
to do it.
yes.
But I do think that there is something in all of us, male and female, all genders. I do think that there is something in all of us that seeks a purpose, that seeks to have some sort of specific vision of where we want to go, that kind of gives life significance, that gives it some heft, that gives it some sense of there I was here in the
Yeah.
world and I did something here while I was here. And I think that we don't have to get into all of the reasons why, but I think that there's just a lot in contemporary Western culture that says that strips that desire for purpose, that strips that desire for being able to pursue. There's healthy and shadow sides to this. We all want something.
Mm.
We all want to pursue something purposeful, and we all want to learn how to do that. But I think that there's some way that's been warped for men.
I agree. And I think, yeah, I'm glad that you said for men, because I think that you're right that we have like a problem with how we present manhood or like what we expect from it. Right. I've
Mhm.
given a lot of examples of people who I kind of put on a pedestal and had this kind of like pristine version of their life. The problem with that is just like the statue that's fixed, it's also very breakable. All it takes is a
Mm.
little nudge to knock
Yeah,
it over, and then it's shattered and that image is gone. Right.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's why discovery over answers matters so much. I haven't yet mentioned the women who are role models in my life. And I think just as significantly, if not more so, of when I read my first Marilyn Robinson novel and essay, like when I read Gilead, and there's this paragraph, and maybe about 50 pages in, where the main character is like listening to a baseball game on the radio, and he is contemplating how the moon orbits around the earth as the earth orbits around the sun, and there's this context and presence. And that's another one of those moments where I felt, oh, she's discovering, she's holding big ideas that we often don't let be together in the same space and just letting them sit there. Same
Mhm.
with Mary Oliver or Lucille Clifton, who's one of my absolute favorite poets. She has a poem called Let There Be Dragons, which is about a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But when I discovered those women, I saw something that I hadn't found in any man. It was one of
Mhm.
those moments where Eowyn in Lord of the Rings kills one of the last ring
The Wraith
wraiths.
King. Yeah, the Wraith King.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed
Angmar.
in
Wraith
myself that
King
I got that.
Angmar.
The
Sorry.
King of Angmar. Yes, she kills him. Well, right before she kills him, he says, "No man can kill me." She says, "I am no man."
Yeah.
I had one of those moments, like reading these women, where I just realized they were no man, and it was something so much better, such a gentler way of living that was still as rock solid,
Mm.
right? That
Yeah.
it was still as foundational, if not more. I think of Esther Lightcap Meek, Loving to Know, right? Which is all about like this way of discovery it through love as
Mm-hmm.
a form of truth. And I think because men are pressed in the West to present this stalwart image, and oftentimes it's also expected of them. They're not just pursuing it, but it's expected
Yeah.
of them by
Yeah.
their communities.
Mm-hmm.
We create fragility.
Yeah. Yeah.
We create fragility in men, and men create it in themselves
Mm-hmm.
by not allowing themselves to confidently say, I don't know.
Yeah. Every solution carries the seeds of its own destruction.
Mm, beautiful.
Like that stalwartness was an answer to a problem of the time.
Yes. Yes, I think that's very well said. That's something I think I discovered in Christian Wyman. I think about that poem that I mentioned earlier, 2447 Gray Street. I even wonder if you wouldn't mind if I read it, if I
And if you do that, then I will read my own favorite later.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, perfect. Um, I think I can quote it, but let me just,
I
I'll do a
always think
little,
I can quote something, and then I get about halfway through, and I'm like,
yeah, I feel that very much. But this kind of illustrates, I think whenever I read this from Christian Wyman, it was actually, to use the word seeds, it was the seed of learning how to handle grief. I didn't know it. It was 11 years before my dad died whenever I memorized this poem, but it was the seed of understanding. He says, I don't know in this poem. And I think it's probably something that I quote to myself more than anything else. I'm going to give a little context. So Christian Wyman is, if you don't know him, he's a poet who's still alive today, runs a wonderful program at Yale. He was the editor of Poetry Magazine for 13 years. He was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that was not just life-threatening, it was inevitable that he was going to part this world. He beat those odds, which is incredible. And after his diagnosis, he has this whirlwind of getting this diagnosis. He meets his wife in a coffee shop and they find God together. He has these beautiful passages in My Bright Abyss where he talks about just laying in bed, praying with his wife, and neither of them had prayed in years. And they're just praying and they just bust out laughing because they find it so silly, but it's so serious. So they literally love each other back to God. He finds out that his wife is pregnant with twins, and this whirlwind of emotion. So if you imagine that, if you imagine him sitting at 2047 Gray Street, which is the title of this poem, and their first house together, this is the man's meditation. And a man not rejecting his own fragility, but actually embracing it as a way to discover. So he says, but the world is more often refuge than evidence, comfort and covert for the flinching will rather than the sharp, particulate instance through which God's being burns into ours. I say God and mean more than the bright abyss that opens in that word. I say world and mean less than the abstract oblivion of atoms out of which every intact thing emerges, into which every intact thing finally goes. I do not know how to come closer to God except by standing where a world is ending for one man.
mm,
It is still dark, and for an hour, I have listened to the breathing of the woman I love beyond my ability to love. Praise to the pain scalding us toward each other. The grief beyond which, please God, she will live and thrive. And praise to the light that is not yet, the dawn in which one bird believes, crying not as if there had been no night, but as if there were no night through which it had not been. I remember reading that for the first time on the subway, on the D train, and beginning to understand grief and seeing a man who could hold his own fragility and allow it to not silence his hope, but also to not reduce it to a scrape on the knee. And that's a different kind of masculinity.
Yeah. It is a real strength to be tender.
Yeah. And we have such an aversion to it now. We have such an aversion to it. We view it as people are literally now saying empathy is a weakness. That tenderness is a weakness. And it's the path. It's the path to more love and more care. It's the path to more truth. It's the path to a life that isn't two-dimensional. It is the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it might have been, it was one of the first times I encountered Christian Wyman's work, if not the first. I remember I was with my best friend, and when we both still lived in the DC area, we would just take a weekend and go to a bookstore somewhere in the DC area, find a
Yeah.
restaurant, hang out, all this stuff. And I remember she was paying at the register, and I picked up this magazine. I can't even remember which magazine. And it had this essay by Christian Wyman in it. And I remember skimming the essay, and I think it was he had discovered he had been diagnosed with a cancer. It might have been after he'd met his wife. So this was still early on. And I remember towards the end of the essay this line, and it literally made me close, step up behind my friend, and go to the register
Yeah.
and just be like,
Yeah.
I need to. And the line was, love to not deliver me from the world, but into it.
Yes.
And I think about that all the time because I'm like, it's one of those where I'm like, I sense because my entire being resonates with this truth of it, but I still just don't fully understand that. But there is truth that because my entire being just vibrates like a bomb, a gong, right?
Can you say the line one more time?
Love
It's
did
so
not
rich.
deliver me from the world, but into it.
Isn't there? There's something in that he gets where I think so many of us, especially men, are expecting love to deliver us from the world.
Ah,
Right? We are expecting to find this thing that just lets us be silent or quiet or has the answers so we don't, whatever it might be.
yeah,
And it doesn't make our lives cleaner. It actually makes them more messy, not less. Like we cannot escape the hurt and we can't go around it. We have to embrace it.
yeah,
Yeah, I think actually, if you don't mind, since we're on Christian Wyman, I think he wrote this amazing book, which I ended up, writing about for my dissertation called Stolen Air.
yes,
And he translated the works of Osip Mandelstam. And because he didn't know Russian, he almost translated them through other translations and through his understanding, the little that he did of Russian. And he allowed himself to, what he says in the book, he allowed himself to version the poems. So you
mm,
end up with this relationship between the two where he's not syntactically translating every word. Instead, he's, if I can say it, he's vibe translating, right? He's like getting the
Love that.
vibe of
Yeah.
the poem,
Yeah.
and he is allowing himself to translate it through his own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves these lines of allowing paradox to sit, which that quote that you said is exactly that. He's
Yeah.
allowing this kind of disjointed thought to just sit. Love deliver you from the world, love deliver you into it. And he's just going to sit with that idea. And he ends this book of versions of poems, translations, with what was Osip Mandelstrom's final poem. And Osip Mandelstam was another figure who became a role model for me, who's this poet who lived in Russia under Stalin, and he was exiled because he wrote a poem making fun of Stalin. He was exiled.
Mm.
He was sent away. And he's another kind of complex figure who he had this amazing wife, Nadezhda Mandelstam. You cannot speak Osip Mandelstam without saying Nadezhda. Nadezhda saved all of his work and wrote these two beautiful memoirs about their life together. He's sent away, and he writes this poem, this really fragment of a poem at the end of his life, and Wyman translates it. It's called And I Was Alive. And I was alive in the blizzard of the blossoming pear. Myself I stood in the storm of the bird cherry tree. It was all leaf life and star shower, unerring, self-shattering power, and it was all aimed at me. What is this dire delight? Flowering, fleeing, always earth. What is being? What is truth? Blossoms rupture and rapture the air, all hover and hammer. Time intensified and time intolerable. Sweetness raveling rot. It is now, it is not.
Mm.
In that, I think you sense the messiness and the beauty of messiness in two men confronting their own fragility and the end of their life. It is now, it is not. It's all rupture and rapture. It's hover and it's hammer.
Yeah.
And you have this beautiful image of Osip and Wyman standing in this blossoming and the leaves around them, and they're feeling the weight of it because they sense it might be the end. It is allowing ourselves again to be sent into the world and embrace its messiness instead of thinking we'll be delivered from it.
Yeah. Can I share my favorite one?
Please do. I love poems, so I'll listen to them all day.
I think Christian Wyman does so well that sense of that tension. He holds so well that
Yeah.
tension of wanting, but also wanting not to want.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It,
Oh, that
I think,
reminds me of a quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, you can't get what you want by wanting it too desperately. At least you can't get the best out of it. It's like almost wanting becomes an indulgence.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my favorite Christian Wyman poem is Every Riven Thing.
Oh, I love this one.
Yes. God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made, sing his being simply by being the thing it is. Stone and tree and sky, man who sees and sings and wonders why God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made, means a storm of peace. Think of the atoms inside the stone. Think of the man who sits alone, trying to will himself into a stillness where God goes, belonging. To every riven thing he's made, there is given one shade, shaped exactly to the thing itself. Under the tree, a darker tree. Under the man, the only man to see God goes, belonging to every riven thing. He's made the things that bring him near, made the mind that makes him go. A part of what man knows, apart from what man knows. God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made.
Mm. I absolutely love that poem. And I think in the context of our conversation, I want to know what your favorite line is there, because that's the kind of poem where you can have a lot of different favorite lines. I think the one that struck me in our conversation was the man trying to will himself into a stillness where God goes belonging. There's that effort and that effortlessness, right?
Yeah.
Where I think so much of what Wyman is trying to teach us is the letting go, is the becoming, is the discovering,
Mhm.
even though it's the scariest thing. But I want to know what your
Yeah.
favorite line or what line struck you this time was.
Yeah. Actually, it was he's made the things that bring him near, made the mind that makes him go.
Oh, yeah. Isn't it so interesting that he says things and mind there
Yeah.
made the things that bring him near? I wonder if he thought of the bird cherry tree or nature or whatever it is, and then the intellectualizing is the thing that's him.
Yeah. Because it's the mind. There's an animal fear. There's that instinctive body fear. But most of the time when we're afraid, it's because we are coming up with reasons to be afraid.
Oh, yeah.
We're creating a story as to why it makes sense for us to be afraid and to stay afraid.
Yeah. And choosing to live in that story.
Yeah.
We would build a little cage for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of that it resonates with me and even defines. I thank you for saying those words and giving me words for some of that. I think that almost acts as like a thesis statement for what we've discussed, that the stories that we tell ourselves that might reduce our lives, create them into these two-dimensional images
Mm,
that we apply to others to reduce their life to the two-dimensional
yeah.
image, is the thing that keeps us from belonging and getting the most out of whoever we would call a role model, which, if we have the right lens, could be anything, anyone.
Yeah. I think last fall I gave a speech and I should have expected the question. But the first question they asked me was, "Who are your role models?" I was like,
Darn it.
"Oh,
Yeah.
way to hit me out of the sandbag on that one." And if I it's so interesting because I thought when you were talking about, especially the women writers that you looked up to that were shaped you, I was like, for me, those were the men, the male writers. It was
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, it was Tolkien, it was T.S. Eliot, it was,
Oh, wow.
and I'm so grateful for them. And I wouldn't, obviously, you wouldn't be who you are. I wouldn't be who I am without those. But I just thought, for me, there was also this sense of, so where are the women? Where are these
Mm.
women? Who am I looking at? Like, how did I learn to be female? How did I learn to be feminine? Again, fundamentalist church, always wore a skirt, no jeans, no jeans. God forbid you wore shorts.
Not allowed. Yeah.
No. So there was always a very specific idea of femininity, but I never took that on. Which I don't
Mm.
but which is just an interesting, like, something
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to see if I can reverse engineer how this worked out.
Right.
Because I never took that on, and I never took on this idea that in order to be a full female, in order to be a full woman, I had to be married with children. I never took on that there were certain jobs I could. My parents, God bless them, have said since I was a wee bairn, "You can do whatever you want as long as you can support yourself." Which,
And you
I
did.
mean, I don't know who hears that these days, but seriously, you
No,
can do
right.
whatever you want. So, I'm just thinking about, is there something to finding, like, opposite sex, opposite gender role models that's
Oh, that's
necessary, that's helpful, that you I do think you need both? I'm just exploring.
yeah. I think that's such a wonderful thought. And I appreciate you sharing even that pull toward Elliot and Lewis. And I wanted to ask, do you think if you would have was it that you didn't have women who you women who were role models, how do I want to put this? Do you think if you would have had maybe women in your life who were role models, that would have changed? I guess it's a chicken or egg thing. Like,
Uh,
first, was it that you just didn't find that
yeah.
kind of view of womanhood in your church attractive? So you're like, they're not role models? Or do you think if there would have been a Marilyn Robinson or whatever it is, would you have been like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I don't know. Because I would
And
say that
that's almost impossible to say, right?
yeah, yeah. Because I would say that even that today, like some of the most significant relationships I have are my relationships with other women. Some of my favorite relationships are my relationship with men
Yeah.
as friends, because sometimes it's just like, that is such a different way of seeing the world. Interesting.
That curiosity draw. You must be a 5 wing on the Enneagram, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So it's that curiosity that you're like, I want to discover more, which I get.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I will say, continue with that thought. Have
Eh,
another little
no, I
trail.
might have finished with that thought. I would have rambled on, but I'm just trying to think. I made when I was very young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, I made 3 vows to myself. I vowed that I would never be a secretary, I would never marry a man in the military, and I would never marry a man in the ministry. I was 7. How did I know? Like, where did this come from?
That's some insight. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been, like, an administrative assistant secretary many times over, and I've been in seminary and ministry myself.
Yeah.
Like, God in his infinite wisdom and humor will marry me off to a military chaplain. But I just even at that age, like, the views of how to be human
Mm.
were just not clicking for me, and it was also and possibly I'm curious if this was a message you also heard when you were growing up, being creative and being Christian were not compatible.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Creativity was, I think, because it's a mode of discovery in that form of Christianity, was viewed as a danger because discovery is bad. Like, it's good
Yes.
to keep the answers that you have locked up and you're locked in on those answers. But I think that you've hit on something that's so fantastic, which is, it's like, I think of the Hamilton song, like the world is wide enough. Is that, I think that's a
Mm.
Hamilton lyric or something like that. I think that the narrower, maybe the more two-dimensional our view of how a person can be in the world, the less we get out of the world. So I remember when my brother came out to me, or I remember when I've had friends come out to me, and I know that there's a version of myself that would go, in the past would have gone, that's not a way to be. Allowing myself to understand and truly ask and sit in silence and be present and all of the wonderful things that you started this podcast with, it opened up a new way of being that made the world more, not less. And I
Mm.
wonder if there's some sense, going back to your question of, you were looking at these men who were writers in your life, I was looking at these women, and it opened up this world. It really boils down to, I found people who had a different way of being, and I allowed myself to be curious and not reductionistic to the
Yeah.
point that I would accept whatever it was wholesale.
Sure.
Instead, I had just allowed, it's not a switching of belief or a switching. I'm not trading in one worldview system for another. It's allowing it to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Creativity is a mode of discovery. And for
I
me,
think,
creativity was more important.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that it was that compelling. Another thing I think about, like you mentioned Lewis and Tolkien and Eliot, they all have poetry, not to shoehorn it in everywhere, but they all have this kind of mode of discovery through poetry. Another kind of big influence for me was Tolkien and reading Lord of the Rings and seeing all of these times where Aragorn is sitting by himself, quoting poems to himself.
Yeah.
And what he's really doing is he's reminding himself of who he is, of who he could be. And the people around him don't even know the words that he's speaking, but he's allowing them to flood his vision and his imagination. And he
Hmm.
uses poetry as a method of becoming.
Oh, I love that. Poetry is a method of becoming. Yes.
He sings himself to the throne. He sings himself out of exile to kingship.
Yeah. And poetry in pre-modern times was song. Like song and poetry were
Yes.
the same thing. So, yeah. Yeah. I remember when we had first discovered the cancer, it was thyroid cancer, and I had
Mm.
to go for an MRI. And I never thought I was claustrophobic until I went into an MRI machine.
Oh, that would terrify me.
And I remember because you can't move. In theory, you can't move while you're sitting in the machine, and it's making all this noise around you. And I had this, what in the world? Because it was so like sudden. Oh, we've discovered this. Oh, you need to go. So I'm like running from one appointment to another to get to another. And so it says, hurry up
Wow.
and wait. And you just get in this terrible mockery of a birth canal. And I remember laying in there and trying to sing myself out of anxiety. I remember it was
Mhm.
the Lord is my shepherd. I was going through that because I'm a big fan of Dune. I was reciting the litany against fear.
That's amazing, by the way.
I think I was also got through William Butler Yeats' The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I remember
Mm.
that. Yeah, sing yourself out of anxiety.
You had another voice in your head. You had
Yeah.
a. I love even just the thought. Mr. Rogers had this prayer, Lord, let some word that is heard today be yours. I think that what you're describing is so beautiful because no matter maybe sometimes who the person is, we can borrow these words and just allow them to not be our own.
Yeah.
And it allows us to be, even for a moment, the person that we would like to be, not the person who we feel our circumstances are making us to be.
Anything and everyone can be equipment for living in a good way.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm going to write that down. Wow. Was that just straight off the dome? Wow. Thank you.
Lots of good nuggets here. Lots of good nuggets. Two more questions.
Cool.
Penultimate question. What about our conversation today has been most helpful?
That last line that you said was tremendous. Um, your definition of a role model as a person who teaches what to love and how to love it is something that I will carry with me for a very long time. That is one of those statements that is a compass statement in your life. If you're in those moments of not knowing, that's the kind of statement that you can go back to. You're like, this is a test I can make to find out where I should go. I would also say that one of the more meaningful things in our conversation is uh, just the ability to sit and, if you will, sing to each other, to share poems back and forth, um, to share stories back and forth, and allow that to be that. That's a rarity in the world and a gift that we should perhaps all indulge in more often.
Amen. Here, here. Seconded.
What about you?
It was the poetry. It was the poetry.
Wyman always hits.
He
He's
always does. But it was also the reminder. So When I was younger, I defined myself as a poet. I wrote poems like I breathed. And after my cancer, so a year after I had cancer, I moved across country to go to seminary. And I don't know if it was all of that combined or something else, but poetry stopped.
Wow.
And I've written one or two half alive things over the years, but I have not been able to either open that door or recover that self or meet that self again in a new way.
Mm.
And our singing to each other was just a little hello.
Isn't it
There's a
beautiful?
fence between us, but I think we can break it down. Let's keep going. Let's
You
bring.
can come back.
Yeah.
I think that you might even, and this goes back to your definition of what a good role model is. They teach us what to love and how to love it. If you can, this might be too glib, but if you would, we can be role models to ourselves, and even like writing down what are the things that we love. Like I've got this little list in Notion where I keep my second brain, if you will, and it's just habits for a better life, or what I should really call it is habits to know I'm alive. And
Mm.
it's just a list of things that some of them are proactive and some of them are intuitive or natural, where I know if I'm doing these things, I'm living a good life
Mm.
and my life is going how I want. One of them is if first lines of poems pop into my head, which has not happened in years now, like you. And I try not to judge myself for it, but I just have it in the back of my head. Like when that starts happening again, I better pay attention and be grateful. So I think it's so wonderful that you are that gentle with yourself now and your past self, and you're allowing those two selves to be in conversation and be friends, and you can even let like your past self be a role model to you now in a way, and you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. How can our past selves be a role model? Oh man. Boom, 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 boom.
Sometimes they knew some really cool stuff, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
my 25-year-old self now surprises me, where I'm like, dude, like that was a good idea, man. Good choice. Thank you. I want to live like that guy.
I know. My mom says that when I was 3 years old, I had more confidence than I had any right to have, and I was like, I would love to have some of that now.
Isn't that beautiful? You're three. I love that image of like your 3-year-old Megan being like one of your role models now. What did that girl have? Like
I know.
I'm gonna,
Listen,
whatever she was loving, I'm gonna love that.
before I get to the last question, let's share our favorite Lucille Clifton. I'm going to share my favorite Lucille Clifton. She has many.
Awesome.
She has many. One of them is I wish for my sons to be basically have your period and be stuck without a pad out and wearing white pants. I love that poem. But this is not that poem. This one is the calling of the disciples.
Ooh.
Some Jesus has come on me. I throw down my nets into the water he walks. I loose the fish he feeds to cities, and everyone calls me an old name as I follow out, laughing like God's fool behind this Jesus.
Wow. Everyone calls me by an old name. Wow. That's a, she was so uniquely gifted at understanding where she came from and her context and who she wanted to be because of and in spite of it.
Yeah.
That line, my favorite, might um, compliment that almost like they were written by the same person, but it's a poem called "Here Yet Be Dragons," which is
Mm.
also, so many of my favorite poems are about poems, like they're poems about poems. There's one of them. It's "Yet Be Dragons." So many languages have fallen off the edge of the world into the dragon's mouth.
Mm.
Somewhere there be monsters whose teeth are sharp and sparkle with lost people, lost poems. Who among us can imagine ourselves unimagined? Who among us can speak so fragile tongue and remain proud?
So fragile tongued and remain proud.
It's such an interesting line. Who among us can speak with so fragile tongue and remain proud? She doesn't even say so fragile a tongue. She just says so fragile tongue. Like it's this like universal final thing that we all have, this fragile tongue that is broken promises and words that are going to be forgotten, and right, and yet remain proud that there is an eternity in this little word that escapes.
Yeah.
She's so amazing.
Yeah. Love Lucille Clifton. Last question. It's my favorite question because I'm so curious. What's the story of the best or the worst taco that you have ever had?
Oh, best or worst taco. This is perfect and providential because there was a there's a taco truck next to the gas station that I go to.
Okay.
And that is a little bit scary,
Yes.
right? Like, do I want to, like, that's a gamble, right?
Yes.
Do you believe the food grade that's like in the window? And today I just took a gamble on it, and I got tacos from there, and it was incredible. So my answer might be the best. This is a little in my head. The answer might be the best taco I've ever had is always the last one I've had, because they're so difficult to, like, you could hand me a Taco Bell taco right now, and I know the quality's different, but
Yeah.
I would be so happy because it's a taco.
It right? It's
Yeah.
a taco.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a definitive answer?
I would say somewhat like yours, like the last one I have is usually my favorite. During the pandemic, the neighborhood like management started scheduling food trucks to come into the neighborhood.
Amazing.
And we've kept it up. Like they've kept it up. And because everyone loves it's fun.
It's a brilliant idea.
And one of them was a fusion taco, and I still remember their chicken tikka masala taco.
Ooh.
And it was just this fantastic mix of the chicken tikka flavor with this cilantro, limey,
Ooh.
coleslaw,
That
crema,
sounds
kind yeah.
incredible.
So that is, and I think, and they named their trucks Ferdinand and Bessie, which I love. So
Yeah.
got my
I'm
taco
sure
from
that they're real
Ferdinand.
people, but what the image that popped into my head was just like two cows who are like best friends named Ferdinand and Bessie.
Actually, I think their logo is a cow, so you're not far wrong.
Okay. We're tracking. That's my spirit taco truck now.
So yeah, so that, and I haven't. I think they've stopped making that particular one. I'm like,
We'll create a petition and get all your listeners to sign it. Bring back the tikka masala
yes,
taco from Ferdinand and Bessie.
yes, absolutely. Christian, this has been just an absolute delight, a rich conversation. I knew it would be, and yet it surpassed even anything that I imagined. So thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you if they'd like to check in with your work or see what you're up to?
Sure. First off, though, to say this has been such a gift for me. Thank you for inviting me and sharing your wisdom and asking these questions and creating space for silence and for discovery and for reading poems back and forth to each other. That's really special. People can find me online at crs.work. I'm very happy that I got that great short domain, crs.work. Or you can check me out on Instagram at Christian Robert Shockley. a very long handle, but it's my name. So look me up. I've got some blackout poems and photography and stuff like that. If you ever want to chat about poems, send me a message.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. Always a
Thank
delight.
you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you found something that resonated with you and that encourages you to become more hopeful, creative, and wise in your own life. Make sure to check out the links in the description below and like and subscribe if you enjoy this episode. Shalom.